Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Environment and Planning Committee meeting of Monday, the 8th of May, 2023. I'll declare the meeting open at 7 p.m. I'll start with acknowledging the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the lands, waters and sky in the Georges River area. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who may be watching online tonight or in the room, or who live, work and meet on these lands. Always was, always will be. Our next item on the agenda is apologies. I've received advice that Councillor Peter Marnie is an apology for this evening, and I think that's it. I think everybody else is here. So can I please have a motion to accept an apology and grant a leave of absence? Moved by Councillor Borg and seconded by Councillor Jamieson. Thank you. All those in favour? Anyone against? Okay, we'll declare that carried. We have no request to join via audio-visual link. Our notice of live streaming of the committee meeting. Staff and public are reminded that this meeting is being recorded for minute-taking purposes and is also being broadcast live on Council's website. This recording will be made available on Council's website. Code of meeting practice. The order of business is as shown in the agenda, which has been made available. Staff and public are reminded that this meeting is open. Doors to the meeting room are to be left open unless the meeting moves into a closed or confidential session, according to section 14 of the Code of Meeting Practice. Council's Code of Meeting Practice prohibits the electronic recording of meetings without the express permission of Council. Mobile phones must be turned to silent during the meeting. Disclosures of interest. Do any councillors have any interest to declare? No? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you. Public participation on items on the agenda. We have 3 speakers registered for tonight's meeting. I would remind the speakers that speakers have a 3-minute time limit. The first sound you hear indicates that you have 1 minute remaining. At the second sound, please conclude your comments. Our first speaker for this evening is Mr. Adrian Polhill, and Mr. Polhill is speaking on ENV 016-23, Significant Tree Register Consultation. Mr. Polhill, please go ahead.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you and very much. It's a pleasure to be here once again. Thank you to all the staff and the councillors. I'd like to first of all congratulate you on actually getting the first start on this significant tree register. The members of Oakleigh Flora and Fauna have been very keen to have this tree register put in place for many years. And so now it's really starting. So thank you very much for kicking off the ball and making a really good start. I have read parts of the report that's in front of you, and I'd like to suggest a couple of things which may indeed improve the report so far. One is that there are just a small amount of budget allocated to the first stage of this significant tree register, and I would encourage you to look at that carefully and perhaps expand that budget, because there's a lot of work to do to look at all those potential significant trees that the public will nominate, and I believe the budget that's put together so far perhaps is not enough. Second point is I looked very closely at the assessment criteria, and I think that there's one that's quite significant to make a more reasonably balanced assessment criteria, and that is the focus on the fact that every significant tree that will be nominated really does have an important role to play in terms of carbon sequestration. So if you could look very carefully at those, I think there's 5 or 6 assessment criteria, and perhaps add another one which relates to climate abatement, and therefore looking at the carbon sequestration that each significant tree will provide. I know I'm going to run out of time here. There's a few other suggestions in terms of making sure that there's enough time for the public to actually nominate these particular trees to go onto the significant tree register. I feel that 30 days is certainly not enough time for the initial the initial time for the public to actually get to nominate those particular trees. So maybe an extension of that time to 60 days may be very valuable. Another point to raise is we have a question on when significant trees are nominated, what is the real protection that they will have? So is that very clearly documented? And the other last one is that what will be the process if indeed a significant tree is damaged? Or maliciously or otherwise, what is the process that the council undertake? Thank you very much. The members of Oakleigh Flora and Fauna Society, Conservation Society, really appreciate all the hard work you've done, and we encourage you to move full steam ahead with this wonderful project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Polhill. Our next speaker for this evening is Mr. Richard Ford, also in person, and he is speaking on ENV 014-23, Sans Souci Park Plan of Management and Master Plan Adoption. Please go ahead, Mr. Ford.
Thank you. Richard Ford, Kojo Proprietary Limited Investment Indus Cruises, part of a local family business that's been operating from the park since the 1980s. So we feel we have certainly a vested interest in the park and interest how it progresses going forward. Firstly, I'd like to commend Council on the report. I do note that it was commenced in COVID, so very difficult to plan and map the usage as it's changed over the last 3 to 4 years through the duration of this report. So I'd like to take this opportunity just to highlight some of the focus areas that I feel, having been involved with the park for so many years, that we currently challenged and aligned with the report is the intensification of use of the park. Being a park, it may not have been picked up in the report coming out of COVID how busy the park is with the current pool, cruise facility, public wharf, fishing and the playground. And the current challenge I see is that intensification and the public pedestrian interface with the vehicle movements in the park. So that's, for me, just something I wanted to bring to the attention for this plan, and that's a main focus, I think, that needs rectification fairly immediately, with people having to cross the roads and the parking as we come off a 6-lane highway. The park's unique in that it's bounded by a 6-lane highway in the north, the river in the south. So as intensification grows, there's no room for expansion. When it's busy, there's no overflow areas. We haven't seen the effect of the mixed resi and commercial buildings built on the northern boundary. So expect that will add further pressures on this park. So my main point tonight is to be conscious as this plan, and I recognise that plans are an opportunity and may not all be progressed, but just that intensification. I think also another point that I wanted to raise on the plan of management is parking goes along with the pedestrian management. There's many occasions when it's oversubscribed, and once again there's no overflow capacity in the local streets because we're bounded by the river, the 6-lane highway, and are now dense. So as any of the plans go forward, really like to be part of the consultation and planning to ensure that parking and that intensification is managed. In summary, I'd like to thank the council, and it's great to have a plan of management to move forward, and I think there's some great elements in there that will enhance for all the users. My main areas being that pedestrian interface, the parking, and retaining the public wharf. I think it's one of the only public wharfs on the Georges River for the Georges River Council. So I noted in there it was said to change to a fishing wharf, but public wharfs are important for the use of the recreational and commercial boaters. Thanks for your time tonight, and thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Our next submission is from Mr. David Barker. It's on ENV 015-23, results of the public exhibition of Merriman Reserve Master Plan options. And this is actually a written submission. It will be read to us by Ms. McKinley. Are you doing us the honour? Thank you.
I wish to put on record the disappointment in the handling of the club and premises. I acknowledge the community feedback for the preference of option 1 for the study. I note that in nearly all feedback submitted, the use of the reserve and attached facilities is for all activities except for dining. This is, as I must presume, for the local community do not see the space as used for dining anymore and is mostly used as a car park to access the water and for kids to ride bikes. The club was previously put to a tender in 2016 to provide a location for the community to gather for food and functions. Community meetings for the club were very highly attended, with many in the community wishing to keep the location as a bistro. I remember parts of the submission for tender for the premises as a restaurant function centre was to provide for community dining and be open certain hours for public amenity. I have been advised by this council that there were no conditions in the lease to meet any of the criteria in the tender process, and as such, they provide no such service. It's obvious from the popularity of the restaurants and cafes located just down the road at 25 to 31 Carl Parade that there is significant demand for both cafes and restaurant facilities in the area. The facilities of Merriman Reserve should centre around the club and its facilities. The council needs to protect the interests of the residents and at best not renew the lease for the current tenant of the club without commitment to meeting the community needs as addressed from 2016 tender process. David Barker.
Thank you, Ms. McKinley. Okay, our next item on the agenda is confirmation of the minutes from the previous meeting, which was on Tuesday, the 11th of April. Could I have a mover? Thank you. Councillor Borg is the mover and Councillor Christina Jamieson is the seconder. Thank you. All those in favour? Anyone against? Okay, we declare that carried. And our first committee report is item ENV 013-23, the draft swimming pool compliance policy and inspection program. And tonight, instead of calling for a mover and a seconder, we're going to go directly to reports from council officers, then we'll take questions, and then I'll call for a mover and a seconder. I just think that the process works a lot more smoothly that way. And for this particular item, Mr. Andrew Spooner is going to speak to us councillors.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What we have before us tonight is a draft swimming pool compliance policy and inspection program, and we're seeking Council's endorsement to put both of those documents on public exhibition. Currently, Council has an internal procedure in relation to swimming pool inspection programs, but in order to meet legislative requirements, that policy needs to be adopted by Council and seek feedback from the community to make sure it's robust and meets the community's expectation. The Swimming Pools Act requires Council to do that. It also requires Council to make itself aware of all pools in the local government area to make sure that they do comply with the swimming pool requirements in the Act for swimming pool barriers. In addition to meeting our legislative requirements, this report will also meet our audit requirements and identify a number of deficiencies with our program and our policies. Particularly, we need to identify a risk-based approach to dealing with our swimming pool inspection program. We need to amend our policy to address that, and we need to come up with a resourcing strategy that also met both of those. In doing this, we have developed a risk management strategy, and we've identified the key pools that need to be inspected as a priority, and they would be those of shared accommodation, tourist or hang on, I've just forgotten that. Tourist and visitor accommodation and other multi-unit dwellings which are required to be inspected every 3 years. So that would be our number one high priority. The second high priority would be those pools which have been listed as non-compliant. How does that happen? In New South Wales, there is a swimming pool register, which is a state-based register operated through Department of Planning, and every pool in New South Wales needs to be registered, so Council needs to make sure that happens. Secondly, when a property with pool is sold, it needs to have a swimming pool certificate of compliance, as does a property that is leased. Now, these swimming pool certificates of compliance can be issued by Council or private certifiers. When they're issued by private certifiers. They have to notify the swimming pools register and provide council with a list of those problems on that particular site, and the council is charged to go out there and rectify those pools. So we have a significant backlog with those. There's over 400 properties that need to be inspected. I think obviously the property boom prior to and during COVID has left us behind, and as a result of that, we needed to employ an additional role. So we now have 2 swimming pool officers to deal with that, and based on that risk approach to dealing with swimming pools, we believe we can now manage that more effectively to reduce council risk. I think, unless there's some questions, I'm happy to answer in relation to that, but that's really the essence of the report. The policy talks about what our obligations are and what we need to do to make the legislation, and the procedure talks about how we're going to go about doing that. So, in essence, councillors, we're asking for those documents to be placed in the exhibition for 28 days to seek community feedback. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Mr. Spooner. Councillors, do we have any questions? Councillor Jamieson?
Yep, I just have a question. If you go and inspect a property now, if there might be any other issues, does it have to, even though it's not being sold, leased, or all that, do you have to do it according to the new standard?
Thank you, Councillor. That's a really good question. And there is some recent communication from the Department of Fair Trading that indicates that unless it can be established that a swimming pool fence complied with the requirements as of the 31st of August 2008 and has continued to comply with those requirements, and that's going to be difficult to prove, that fence would need to be upgraded to meet current standards. So that is another piece of work that we need to do to ensure the community is aware of that requirement. And we've had a number of situations where people have replaced fences or made changes to fences, and that's caught them out because it no longer was compliant in a continuum for that period of time. So we need to do some, and that's separate to this, but we will be doing some fairly broad community education on what those requirements mean to the individuals, because it is a significant change and it can be a significant expensive change.
Thanks, Mr. Spooner. Any questions, councillors? Any further questions? Okay, if that's the case, because we're actually, the recommendation is to, as you can see, endorse the policy and put it out on exhibition. So can I call for a mover? Okay, moved by Councillor Borg, and would somebody like to second that? Okay, so it's moved by Councillor Borg and seconded by Councillor Ambi Haberhar. We might need to go around the room. I think Ms. McKinley, thank you.
Your vote, please, Madam Chair.
For.
Councillor Ambi Haberhar.
For.
Councillor Borg.
For.
Councillor Jamieson.
For.
Councillor Wang.
For.
5 votes, unanimous.
Thank you. We can declare that one carried. Moving on to our next item, ENV 014-23, which is the Sans Souci Park Plan of Management and Master Plan Adoption. And we're now going to hear from Ms. Fawcett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sans Souci Park is an important historical public place within Georges River local government area, and it's covered by its own plan of management and master plan, which was prepared in 2011. In August 2020, Council engaged Stantec, now previously known as Cardno, to prepare a new plan of management master plan for Sans Souci. A new plan of management master plan was required to comply with the Crown Lands Management Act. In February 2021, preliminary community consultation was conducted, and the feedback received was to inform the draft plan of management and master plan. On 22nd of November 21, Council endorsed the draft plan of management master plan for Sans Souci for public exhibition. The draft plan was forwarded to the Crown for consent to exhibit. The draft plan of management was publicly exhibited from the 2nd November to the 30th of November 2022, with submissions accepted until the 14th of December 2022. A total of 17 submissions were received. Key issues raised were lack of off-street parking and on-street parking on Water Street, the lack of a need for a proposed kiosk structure on the southern end of the park incorporating a commercial cafe and toilet facilities, and concerns regarding the proposed playground equipment, whether there need for an additional play equipment. Changes made to the plan management and master plan, and additional action required for the maintenance and upgrades and development required to the Sans Souci Leisure Centre, removal of the proposed kiosk pavilion structure, including the cafe and toilet facilities at the southern end of the park, and replaced it with provisions of additional open space with covered seating areas, the removal of a diving board, as it was identified that there are too many risks associated with it, replace wording of the master plan from fishing pontoon to viewing deck, and the boat pontoon to fishing pontoon, and the relocation of the gym equipment away from the playground area. The next steps within the plan management, if it is recommended, as it was recommended to adopt, is to forward it to the Crown Lands for their information, advise submitters of the adoption of the report, if adopted, and put on council's website, and a notice published within 21 days. I acknowledge Mr. Ford's submission today, which we have addressed within the plan and management, and I acknowledge that the park is a very busy and popular park. And in concern with the pedestrian and cars, actions within the action plan have addressed vehicle access and pedestrian safety, and also council has resolved to install parking signage and restricting car parking at Sans Souci Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fawcett. Councillors, do we have any questions? Councillor Jamieson.
I did. I just didn't quite understand. So the issues that Mr. Ford raised, how did you address it? Sorry.
Within the plan management, there's an action plan, and within that action plan, there's actions in regards to vehicular access and the way the vehicles access the park and pedestrian safety. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Councillor Borg.
Yes, just wanted to carry on from one of the points raised by Mr. Ford, and it's a point of clarification. Mr. Ford said that he supported retaining the public wharf, and I note that the amended changes he said is to change the wording of the fishing pontoon to the viewing deck and the boat pontoon to the fishing pontoon. Is that the public wharf that Mr. Ford is referring to, or is there another public wharf? So I'm just a bit confused if we're removing a public wharf or not. Sorry.
No, we're not removing a public wharf. There's two wharfs. There's the viewing, it's the fishing pontoon, and then the boat pontoon. Is it? Yeah, and the fishing pontoon. So there's still two pontoons on the site.
So a boat will be able to come up and use the boat pontoon as a wharf.
Yes,
but we're not calling it a wharf. We're calling it a boat pontoon.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, we might go for to move and second the recommendation. Would someone like to move it? Councillor Borg, would you like to move it?
Can I move it with move the officer's recommendation with the addition of an extra item?
Certainly. Is it on the screen?
Yes, it is. Item F. And this just item F is acknowledging what the council officer has just explained, in that recently in the traffic committee, council resolved to implement some parking restrictions in the Sans Souci car park, which was going to prevent long-term parking at that site where there's been campers and things like that. And so it's just the item F is that the draft Sans Souci plan of management be updated so that it reflects the recent resolution of council on the 24th of April, that's the item number, to install parking signage restricting car parking at Sans Souci Park. So it's just acknowledging that council's made that resolution and reflecting that in the plan of management or master plan of management. I don't know.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Borg. So you're moving that amendment. Would somebody like to second it? Okay, seconded by Councillor Jamieson. Did you have anything further you'd like to say on that, Councillor Borg?
No, I'd just like to say thank you to the staff for a good job. I went down to the consultation session that they had down there at the park, and there were a lot of people that came by, were very interested in sharing their thoughts on the park. And I think that the suggestions that are put in place for the pedestrian movements will definitely improve it. And I think, you know, obviously there are a lot of swimming carnivals down there where buses are parking and kids are running across the road. And I think some of the changes that have been recommended will improve that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bork. Councillor Jamieson, did you have anything to add to that?
Oh, not really, but I was just going to say thank you for addressing the issues that the residents bring up and talk about. I appreciate it. I did notice that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions or comments?
I just have one question, and it's, I think it is addressed in the report, but once the report is adopted, the master plan and the plan of management is adopted, does that then mean for the things that are on the plan of management to be implemented, council is now in a position to apply for grants for those projects or put it into the capital works budget?
That is correct, Councillor Bork, yes.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, we might go to move the item. Ms McKinley?
Your vote, please, Madam Chair. For. Councillor Amby Haperhart.
For.
Councillor Bork.
For.
Councillor Jamieson.
For.
Councillor Wang.
For.
5 votes for, unanimous.
Great, so that one is carried. Thank you very much, councillors. Our next item on the agenda is, I'm skipping one. It's EMB 015-23, which is the results of the public exhibition of Merriman Reserve Master Plan options. And before we call for a mover and a seconder, I'm going to call on Ms Stephanie Long to give us a bit of an overview. Thank you, Ms Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Merriman Reserve is a public reserve located on the foreshore of Kyle Bay. So there's an existing plan of management and master plan, which was done in 2013 and endorsed by the former Cogra Council. But given the age of the plan of management, we're updating it, hence going through this process. So in 2021, Council sought feedback from the community on how they currently use the reserve and to seek their ideas on the future uses and activities in the reserve. Following this community feedback, 2 draft master plan options were developed. These were presented to Council in August, and it was then resolved to place them on exhibition, which occurred in late 2022. So we received a number of submissions, both for option 1 but also for option 2. And there are many design options which are shared between the two. However, through considering all the submissions and the issues raised or people's preference, our preference is for option 1. And these are for the following reasons. It's less costly to implement. It's been supported by the key external stakeholders who utilise Merriman Reserve. It's also the overall preferred option expressed by the community. It's less disruptive to users during its implementation, and it's more practical for the people who use at Bowling Green. This option also doesn't preclude the implementation of option 2, which could be implemented at a later stage if decided. So the report presents a preferred master plan, which has been revised from the exhibited option 1. So a number of amendments have been made to the exhibited option 1 in this preferred option, and it involves a review of the small shelter. Review of the small shelter locations, deletion of 1 small shelter, highlighting the localised flooding areas, use of sandstone logs for just vehicular control rather than just for seating as well. A slight increase in the service storage area footprint and more specific actions identified in the foreshore works. Hence, this report recommends that Council endorse the preferred option 1, which has been amended, and further report will be presented to Council on a more refined of that version of that option 1, and seeking Council endorsement to place it on exhibition. So that will occur at a later date. So I wanted to also acknowledge Mr. Barker's submission. So thank you for taking the time to make the submission. It's noted that the lease that you're referring to with regards to the restaurant was offered by tender by the former Cogra Council in 2016. It should be noted that the plan of management and the master plan facilitates the lease of that council building, for example, for a restaurant. However, the lease agreements and the details of that are actually a separate process. But thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Love. Councillors, do you have any questions at all? Okay, I just wanted to just make a point about that, if you wouldn't mind. At the former Cobra Council, we didn't actually, in the lease, that the current lease was signed whilst we're under administration here at Georges River, and when Cobra Council had management of that particular facility, it was a very successful bistro and community building, and you know, I do share some of the concerns perhaps that the submission was made, but as you say, Ms. Lund, we are actually locked into this particular lease with the operator now, and it is very separate to what the plan of management and master plan is. So we need to be considering, councillors, we need to be considering, we have had a workshop on this and it has come up before, but we just do need to clarify that the plan of management and the master plan are separate to the actual building that's on there. So having said that, any other questions, councillors? Could I call for a mover, please? Okay, moved by Councillor Ambi Haypaha and seconded by Councillor Wang. Okay, we might go around the room if that's okay, Ms. McKinley. Thank you.
Your vote, please, Madam Chair.
For.
Councillor Ambi Haypaha.
For.
Councillor Borg.
For.
Councillor Jamieson.
For.
Councillor Wang.
For.
5 votes for, unanimous.
Great, thank you. We'll declare that one carried. Our next item is ENV 016-23, which is a significant tree register consultation. And but once again, before we go to call for a mover, we'll hear from Mr. Andrew Spooner. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a great pleasure in presenting this report, a much long-awaited report on the significant tree register. Council back in 2019 adopted its tree management policy, and as part of that, they made provisions for a later significant tree register document. Unfortunately, this document has required independent funding because I guess the skills and experience required to develop this weren't in-house. So when we put the report to council in March 2021, the staff came up with a draft definition, some draft assessment criteria, and some draft ways in which trees can be nominated as significant. But we also sought a budget bid for $40,000 to fund that project because we just didn't have the internal skills to do that. Unfortunately, that budget bid wasn't endorsed at that time, but it was. We managed to have a $20,000 budget bid endorsed for this financial year, which enabled us to engage a consultant to go away and review that draft definition, assessment criteria and process. As a result of that, we now have what we consider to be stage 1 of this process, because we're not, depending on how many submissions we receive, stage 2 will be looking at those submissions, drafting up the actual document, which will be the significant tree register, and coming up with some criteria about how do we add or remove trees, and what trees are suitable and not suitable for that process to take place. The consultant, in reviewing what the staff had provided, has changed the definition. The definition is a bit more succinct, and it specifically refers to the assessment criteria. The assessment criteria has also been made simplified in that there was 5 specific criteria nominated by the staff. It's now 4. Effectively, the final 2 criteria were combined by the consultant, and the process by which trees can meet that definition, the staff had previously indicated that you needed to meet 3 out of 5 of those particular criteria, which is a bit onerous on reflection, and the consultants indicated that you need to meet 2 of the sub-criteria under each of those 4 criteria, which makes it easier for a tree to meet that criteria. I'd like to, if I may, address the submission that was made, and thank you very much, Adrian, for your submission. Appreciate your comments, and there's a couple of issues there that you've mentioned about the budget and the time to nominate, and I believe there will be an amended motion to address those. In relation to, and thank you for using the word carbon sequestration, because I struggle with that every time I have to say it, so thank you. And look, I haven't been keeping up with my scientific research, so I suspect, and this is, I guess, a lay term, that most trees will secure carbon. And I'm not sure if there's been any research, and maybe you can help us out with that. If as different trees secure carbon, because I can't say sequestration, better than others. And I guess that's the criteria, because if we look at those across that criteria for those 4 different tree criteria, and I think the best one is probably ecological significance. Maybe we put it in just there, but I would suspect that all other trees would also do the same function, but I can't say at what level they would perform that function without any detailed knowledge of doing that. You also mentioned about protection that these trees have. So it's an interesting thing. Going through this process will do 2 things for council. One, it will give us a bank of information about why a tree is significant, which will help us in any future prosecution or enforcement activity if something does happen to that tree, because we've already got the research done to say, well, that tree is significant because of these reasons, so that will help us. But the main difference is that any application to prune or remove a tree is assessed by council's tree officers. In this case, if the tree is on the significant tree register, it will be assessed by the officer, who will then have to do a report to the director, and the director of that division will sign off on that work. So it elevates, I guess, the hierarchy or decision-making process in relation to that tree. So hopefully you will gain greater consistency and have a consistent reference point in relation to those trees being either removed or having pruning works done on them. So it's that higher level. I think that's. Was there one more? Oh, what if the tree's damaged? Again, it's the same process for every tree. It would be an investigation to see who caused. If it could be proven beyond reasonable doubt that we had evidence that a particular person did do that work, then we would take enforcement action against that particular person. So there's no, I guess, no greater protection. It would be the same process as any other tree. The only protection would be if there was an application to remove or prune that tree. So I guess in that regard, all trees are equal. I think I've covered your comments. So was there any questions?
Thank you so much, Mr. Spoon. A very comprehensive report, as usual. Councillors, any questions? No? Councillor
My
Ball.
question was just in relation to the future nomination, and I believe the staff that have given me a response, but after we go through the initial nomination process and assessment process, what do you consider may be the process in the future for a tree to be nominated and assessed whether it should be included after this initial phase?
Yeah, thank you for we have considered that, councillor. It's one of the difficulty we have with this at the moment. It's driven by finance, because we don't have the money to do that assessment now. What we were thinking, and this will form part of the stage 2 report after the consultation comes back, is that we would look at having nominations open all the time, but we would report those or assess those every 2 years, so we can align budget to do that function. And we're not sure how many we're going to get, and I guess that's the thing, is that it's a bit unknown at this stage, because anyone can nominate a tree on council property, that's fine, but if you want to nominate a tree on a private property, it's got to come from the owner of that property, which mirrors our heritage provisions for. So I guess we'll have a better assessment and better idea of that, answering that question once we know. And look, we are hoping that this will be I guess, a fairly extensive program, and we will capture the majority of significant trees in the LGA. But I think if we can do it based on a budget process, and possibly every 2 years, or if we get increased demand, we can probably do it quicker. But it's just a matter of funding and demand for that service to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Spooner. Councillors, any further questions? Okay, I will call for a move on. Councillor Borg, you'd like to move it,
Yes.
and I believe it's being moved in an amended form.
Yes, I'm moving it to council officer's recommendation with an amendment, which is to add a new item B, which is the staff have there, sorry, a revised item B, a new item C, and then the current C becomes D. So I'm happy to read it out if you'd like me
We'll
to do
just
that?
call for a seconder first.
Oh, yeah,
Yep. Can I just get a seconder for Councillor Jamieson seconding?
yeah, I'll read it out. I'm happy to
Yeah,
do that. Yep.
I think so.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
the amended motion that I've moved is that council endorse the definition, criteria and the method for assessment qualification for a significant tree. That council seek nominations of potential trees of significance from the public for a period of no less than 60 days to inform the development of the significant tree register. New item C is that the unspent funds allocated in the 22-23 budget for the significant tree register are carried over into the 23-24 financial year to allow the completion of the project. And item D, that a further report be provided to council in late 2023, presenting the results of the community consultation and the draft significant tree register subject to existing funding.
Thank you, Councillor Borg. Do you want to speak to that amendment or amendments?
Well, I'll just speak to the motion. Yeah. So I would also like to thank the staff for bringing this forward. And I also obviously like to thank the community. I know that it's something that the Oatley Flora and Fauna community have been asking for a long time. And I think, since my short time being on council, there's been a few instances already where there's been trees that people are going, that should be on the significant tree register, but we don't have one. And so that's what keeps highlighting the issue that we need to progress this. So I appreciate that Mr. Spooner's brought the report forward, and happy to see this coming to life. The 60 days extended period will hopefully allow more time for the community to get as many of those nominations in as possible, so we can capture as much of it as possible in that first round and do that assessment, and we won't lose the funding that has been allocated this year for that purpose, with the item C added in there. So thank you to the staff for your help with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Borg. Councillor Jamieson, did you have anything to add? Councillors, any other comments, questions before we move on? Okay, great. Well, I think that it's time to move it. Ms. McKinley?
Madam Chair, your vote, please.
4.
Councillor Amby Haberhar. 4. Councillor Borg.
4.
Councillor Jamieson.
4.
Councillor Wang.
4.
It's 5 votes for, unanimous.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ms. McKinley, and we'll declare that one carried. Just before we finish, I just wanted to thank all of the staff here present tonight and for the enormous amount of work that has gone into preparing this business paper. So some of these particular items have had a long lead time into coming to us tonight, and there's still a lot more work to be done. So thank you so much for your work, and thank you members of the gallery for attending. We'll close the meeting at 7:41 p.m. and good evening and good night.